Welcome to the third video in the Microsoft Educator series for Stonyhurst. This is the second half of the second session. So in the first session we talked about blended learning in some detail. In the second session we have looked already at OneNote, that's the first video, and now we're looking at PowerPoint. So looking at two particular tools which enable us to actually implement blended learning, and particularly we're looking today at flipped instruction with PowerPoint Recorder. Here is the Flipped Learning Network's definition of flipped learning. It's a pedagogical approach in which direct instruction moves from the group learning space to the individual learning space, and the resulting group space is transformed into a dynamic interactive learning environment where the educator guides students as they apply concepts and engage creatively in the subject matter. Perhaps a more clear way of putting it is this, which comes from Microsoft. It's inverting the cycle of content acquisition and application. So presuming that the norm, and of course this isn't going to be ubiquitous, but presuming that the norm is that you would, as a teacher, show the students the content in class, explain it to them, make the first steps to making sure they can understand the basics of the content, and then they go away and do some kind of activity by themselves, which demonstrates the level of understanding or skill or whatever it is that they have developed as a result of what happened in the class. And also doing that activity itself increases their level of skill or the depth of their understanding. Flipped learning is when you invert that. So at home they gain the necessary knowledge. Now, without using any more modern technology, that could be reading a page, listening to a radio show or something like that. But it's typically going to be, and this is what we're looking at it today, a PowerPoint that you're talking through as their teacher. And then, having learned it at home, or done the basics of the learning at home, and you can test that with quick forms quizzes and things. It doesn't have to be totally relying on them watching the video and saying, yes sir, I did. You can check that briefly at home. But the point is that the studies is based mostly, I say at home, obviously that includes in studies for us in our boarding school situation. You don't just take it on trust, you can do a quick check on that. But then when they come into the lesson, you're then there to help them with the follow-up task. So whatever it was you would have said during the lesson, you've said in a PowerPoint video that they're watching in studies, and then whatever you would have set them to go and do by themselves, they do it in the lesson and you support them to do it. So in this example from maths, which I'll let you read yourself, I won't read out to you, note that the teacher's activities are actually not different from what they would have been anyway. It's the student's activities that are different. So that means if you're redesigning the way, if you're a mathematician, that you're teaching Pythagoras theorem, then you can redesign it to be flipped, because you're going to be doing some work on it anyway to re-resource it, say. So why don't you try it as being flipped to see if that helps. Apart from anything else, it means that the studies is an absolutely essential part of being able to access the lesson. And my impression of schools generally, this is not a Stonyhurst comment, but also, you know, this does happen in my lessons, is that there are times when pupils can get away with not doing the studies. They turn up to the next lesson and it doesn't matter that they didn't do the studies. And that actually sort of lessens the value of studies in many ways. Sometimes for practical reasons, sometimes it's just not appropriate. Sometimes you might be concerned that actually the pupils, so many pupils won't do the studies or not fully enough that you would just end up teaching the same lesson over and over again. But in this scenario, when you have content acquisition at home, and I'll just put some more ideas up on the screen. When you've got content acquisition at home and the follow-up activities in class, of course, because the content acquisition is happening independently, if they haven't done it, you can just get them to plug headphones in and do it while you carry on with the rest of the class. Obviously, they have to catch up that time at some point, but it actually doesn't necessarily destroy the beginning of the lesson as much as you might think. So in the Stonyhurst context, every single student has a device that they can have with them in the lesson and outside the lesson. That means that they do have access, therefore, to devices in order to be able to do this work at home, which requires them to access the internet. But also then the activities that they do, the follow-up activities when they get back into the lesson, having acquired the knowledge or the skills, can be much more than would have been possible if it was set as an individual studies assignment, because you're actually in a physical room. So first of all, it could be that it's not digital. That's always a possibility that we should remember. But also all of the things that we talked about in the first session about collaborative working come into play here, therefore, and the activities that happen, which would traditionally be the studies, independent study activities, can come into the classroom as collaborative activities. There are many benefits to the flipped learning model, and it won't suit all topics within all subjects, but these benefits would go across all topics and all subjects, they're total. So if you flip lessons, it increases the quality of access to those lessons, in the sense that anybody who's struggling can watch back the video again a couple of times. Anybody who is absent due to illness can catch up and come back in, and the thing that they're missing is follow-up activities, not the original access to the content. It also means that you have a greater opportunity to check pupils' understanding of the materials by being with them when they're doing the follow-up activities and seeing what they're doing with the knowledge in those independent or collaborative working opportunities. So you can see and hear the students thinking, and any misconceptions there are, you can quickly clear them up rather than doing it a day or two later when you return studies. There's also a way of integrating forms into this. Now, we had a look again at the time of speaking, June 2023, there's a transition with Microsoft Stream. So if these videos are on Stream at the minute, then they've not got forms fully integrated. But that's a small point, really. You could have an exit ticket to this studies, just like you could with a lesson. So you would make people watch video, and they would have to demonstrate by filling in a short forms quiz, perhaps 4 or 5 questions, that they had understood the key points of the video and could demonstrate that they've made some progress in some way. And then you know that they have actually done it as well as a practicality there. It's also a very open approach to instruction. So it kind of demonstrates to other people around you, other people who are looking at your team, which of course in terms of assignments includes now parents, that they know what type of learning is being done. And that, I think, can be quite powerful, perhaps a little bit scary, but also very powerful. And it also preserves classroom time, or as I've written here, classroom time. I suppose time squared increases in importance there. But if a member of staff is going to be absent, then actually the cover work can just be what the studies would have been, without the support of the specialist teacher perhaps, but the actual instruction can still have happened. So you can move on within the topic. The thing that's missing is the thing that would have been missing if you'd not flipped it, rather than in the traditional model where if somebody misses a lesson, it's really difficult to actually provide any instruction during that. Or you could deliver a video to be to give instruction at the beginning of that lesson. I've actually done that a couple of times, not necessarily to deliver content, but to talk to the pupils about the work they need to do. If it's sometimes quite difficult to explain through a cover teacher on a piece of paper, I've set a video as the first 5 minutes to explain what people are supposed to do during the lesson, rather than it just being written down. There's lots of uses for this idea. So let's seize the moment, go to 2b, flipped instruction, and into 1, how do you want? This is in the collaboration space. Answer the question, how do you want to incorporate flipped learning in your classroom? What sort of activities do you think would benefit from this? And just pause the video for 5 minutes, no more than that, to answer that question in the collaboration space and to read other people's answers from your cohort there. So in order to do this practically, you use PowerPoint Recorder, which is all contained within PowerPoint proper. When you click on the record button at the top right hand corner of a PowerPoint screen, it's best to do that if you're in the desktop app, not in Teams or on the web, and you get a screen which looks like this. Up at the top here you've got a record button, and you can just hit that and there it is, it starts recording. It's pretty obvious. But there are some more powerful features. Here you've got some notes. So in a normal PowerPoint screen when you're editing, you have a notes section which is underneath the slide, which you can expand by dragging it up if you can't see enough of it. And that appears at the top of the screen when you are recording a PowerPoint, and I'll explain why it's at the top of the screen rather than underneath in a moment. You've then got these two options for your camera. Now actually my camera, you'll see, is off there, but if you've got your camera on, you appear in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, and there are various options for that. And that's why the notes appear at the top, is because that's closer to the camera. So as you're reading the notes, you're looking up towards the camera rather than down at the bottom of the screen, which makes it look a bit odd. And the second option there is views, which just gives you a couple of different variants of what this screen looks like as to how big you want the PowerPoint slide and whether you want the next PowerPoint slide to show up as well. At the bottom here, it shows you how far you are through the presentation, and that's where you can click left and right to get between slides. When you're recording, you do need to do it linearly. You need to go from left to right. You need to start at 1 and finish at 23, rather than going back and doing little bits and just showing the next slide. If you want to be able to go back to a previous slide and the video show that in the end, you need to put it in twice. These options are for the camera and the microphone. There are some other options under that as well, which you don't need to worry about. But essentially, you'll see I've got my camera off. I'm not doing that at all. And I've got my microphone on so that you can hear me. I think probably in most cases, people will want not to have the camera on, but the option is there. Then there are some inking tools at the bottom, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail in a second. Up here at the top, it tells you how long your presentation is. So the left hand side figure tells you how long the current slide has been recording for, and on the right hand side it tells you how long the whole presentation has taken so far. And as I say, it is linear. It does just carry on from slide 1 to 2 to 3, but if you make a mistake you can stop and you can retake either the whole presentation or just that slide if you need to. What you can't do is show slide 2, talk about slide 2, show slide 3, talk about slide 3, show slide 2 and talk about slide 2. You'd have to put in a copy of slide 2 as slide 4 to do that. There's also an option to record your screen. And so, for example, if you wanted to quickly scroll through a website or show somebody how to log into a particular resource that you've got, you might use Screen Recorder. And the way to access that is to go to the Insert menu and click Screen Recording. and it's pretty simple from there. It makes a video of whatever you do on the screen. It records your voice or whatever as you're doing it, and then it would play that video on that slide. And that works whether you're doing it live in class, sending the presentation to somebody, or making a PowerPoint recording. There's also some fun digital inking tools you can use. You'll see I've been using my light pen effort during this presentation. If I go to the third one along, that's the pen. I can also draw pretty pictures and obviously change the colour of those. There we go, that's exciting. There's also a highlighter, so if there was some text I wanted to highlight, then I could. It's not letting me highlight digital inking and PowerPoint Recorder at the top, but you get the idea. And again, you can change the colour of that. So it just makes it a little bit more possible for you to teach perhaps in the way you would in a lesson, by actually annotating a diagram or something or a text as you go along, rather than having to pre-prepare it having been typed up with slide transitions and so on. It makes it a bit quicker to do. And once you've finished, there's an export button, and you save the PowerPoint as a video. Now, Microsoft Stream is really powerful, and that's a great place to put it, but it's not as powerful in its new version as the old version was yet. So things like automatic captions and being able to integrate forms isn't quite as good, but what you still can do at the moment, you can upload it to Stream and people will be able to find it. You can just put the MP4 file straight in to a team and link to that. I would recommend you don't put it in a OneNote, because all it will do is actually upload it to OneDrive and link to it, which means that because it's in OneDrive rather than in Teams, when you leave, the video leaves with you. So it's best to put it in Teams. Or if you want it to be there for posterity, you could have a departmental YouTube account. And we do this in music partly because we have concerts which we live stream publicly, but also because it's an easy way of hosting it. It's literally you drag it into the YouTube website, you click create, you drag the file across, it's there, and it is possible on YouTube to lock it down so only people who've got the link can access it. The advantage of YouTube over other video sharing sites is if you copy the link from YouTube and paste it into OneNote, it will actually play the video in OneNote, which means that students don't have to go off into the web to find it. So now it's over to you, really. If you go into your OneNote folder, 2b flipped instruction, and then 2 my flipped content. It'd be good if you could get together with your department to do this at some point, but certainly now individually look at a scheme of work, any scheme of work that you have to hand, and identify something which you might be able to flip. And in the live sessions we did this for 10 or 15 minutes, and that was helped by snacks, and if you're at home you're very welcome to do the snacks bit as well. So if you pause the video, go away and do that for 10 or 15 minutes. But what should actually be on your PowerPoint? Well, if you want to create an all-singing, all-dancing PowerPoint with everything that somebody could ever possibly want to know written on it, okay, that's fine, but it's probably not sustainable as a way of doing things for a whole unit of work. So what we're looking for, and this is the slide that we saw earlier, what we're looking for is a framework for your lesson. And I'm talking about the online lesson here. So that you then, when you're recording, you're talking through it and writing your diagrams and so on, rather than you writing everything down that you would ever possibly say under any circumstance. Because when you get to the physical lesson, you're going to be able to deal with all of those issues then, and you're going to have more time to deal with it at that point than you would if you hadn't flipped the lesson. I note that the 6x6 rule, which is here on this slide, this a Microsoft slide I put our crest on, is not kept to. Even on this slide, there is a line with 8 words in it at the bottom there. They use easy to read font sizes and colors. I suppose we could hyphenate easy to read and that would solve that problem, but there are definitely 8 bullet points here. So there we go. But the idea is that simple is good, because the people watching are supposed to be concentrating on what you're saying and anything that you're writing on the screen or pointing at. That's what they should be looking at, not clever transitions or an overwhelming amount of information. That said, the third to last bullet point, add visuals to enhance content, it might be worth looking at some dual coding work. There's a really good book on that published by John Catt, which explains something about how, rather than just throwing text at people or images at people, a combination is advantageous. That's a general pedagogical idea, but particularly applicable when you've got some time to work on some PowerPoints which might be used a few times rather than just in one year. So the only thing to do now, and this should be the third time you've done this, is to go and redeem your achievement code. So the code for this session is 74DJKK. There it is. Thank you very much for watching. Do give it a go and let me know how you got on. I'll see you again in the next session.